Welcome, guys, to this episode of Weight Loss Winformation. This is going to be a little bit different episode today, a topic that has not been broached on my podcast ever before. And I have one of my favorite people joining me today, and she is perfect for this topic. And we'll explain more as we go. But I just want to introduce you if you haven't met Tabitha before. She's a big part of the bariatric care program, and she's been on the podcast several times before.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
So, I am Tabitha Johnson. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor by trade. I'm a post-op bariatric patient. We're going on 8 years.
Wow.
And a mother of 2, and also a believer in Jesus. And so today we're touching on the topic of spirituality and how that potentially can be woven into our weight loss and health journey.
And I love this topic, and we debated about whether or not we should do it. But when Tabitha suggested it, I was like, I love this topic. So at the outset, we want to say that this is not to preach Jesus or God or any particular entity, but more about a higher power.
Yes.
And how would you describe higher power?
You know, a higher power, just something greater than ourselves. Many times, like a higher power can be someone we look to for guidance, but it's really coming outside of us. So in the recovery world, the higher power is really the term that is used. For me specifically, like I mentioned, I do love Jesus, but yes, just wanting to talk about how spirituality can really be a part of this journey in many different ways.
And Tabitha and I both have a history in having been trained through education in alcohol and drug studies and any kind of recovery, any kind of addiction. And in that tradition, the concept of a higher power is big, because there are a lot of people who don't believe in a deity or may come from a culture where there's a prominent religion. So it's not necessarily that we want to talk about religion per se.
Right.
We both are Christian, and for both of us, that has been a big part of our journey. But I think we want to share about our own journey in how a higher power or our spirituality has helped us to get to where we are in our recoveries.
Yes.
And when I say in recovery, I mean, for me, I've had food issues. I've been anorexic. I've been overweight. I've had body image issues for forever. I'm in recovery from alcoholism. My drug of choice, however, was codeine. So pain medications. I've struggled with work addiction. So recovery is not something I know that I could have done without higher power. And I wasn't very involved in church per se when I got into recovery, but higher power, like for at one point, I think my therapist probably, I had a therapist for 3 or 4 years, and then I moved out of the state, but we kept in touch. And over the years, we became friends. We didn't talk all the time, but every time I would return to Iowa. But she's probably the most influential woman ever in my life. And she has since passed, but she was definitely a higher power in that.
Yes.
She very lovingly confronted me about things that I was doing that went against my value system.
Right.
And I think people who struggle with the disease of obesity oftentimes know what to do through different diet programs or programs they've been in, but struggle to do that.
Right.
And I think that we need intervention outside of ourselves, as you said, to sometimes give us information that we don't have ourselves.
Right.
And so if that's a group, like the 12 steps, or if it's a therapy group or a group in your bariatric community, that in a sense can be a higher power.
For sure. And thank you for sharing just your areas of recovery. So not everybody knows, but I was in a group called Celebrate Recovery, which is a faith-based 12-step program. And so I was in the codependency group. I've also struggled with food issues. And later they added groups like for anxiety and depression. So a little bit more on the therapeutic side. So for me, having that higher power and that relationship with the higher power has been helpful to just keep me sort of on a level path throughout the journey, because I think I sort of felt lost.
Right. And a higher power can be very grounding.
Yes.
And help keep us centered. Yes. And help us remember priorities, to prioritize and figure out what our values really are, and then work to stay true to those values. And in some cases can help us sort out the things that are interfering with our ability or willingness.
True.
Maybe. And in bariatric care, I do a 12-step component.
Right.
And not a lot, people have some preconceived ideas about the 12 steps, and, you got to believe in God, and you got to, that is not a true statement. The 12 steps are very much like Celebrate Recovery.
Yes.
Celebrate Recovery was put into churches for those people who wanted that additional
that faith layer, I guess.
Christian too, right?
Yes.
It's just a Christian-based program. So either way, and I'll tell you, in the bariatric care program, and for anybody who's listening, the 12 steps or the Celebrate Recovery steps are an amazing way to live your life, even if you don't have an addiction.
So true.
One of my good friends back in the day, she was in her late 20s, early 30s, and she didn't know if she was an alcoholic or she just was abusing alcohol or what. And she was talking to her physician about it. And her physician said to her, it doesn't matter where you fall in that continuum of, are you abusing food? Are you abusing alcohol? Are you do you have an addiction to it? If it's a problem, it's a problem, right? I like that because it's like, we don't have to worry about what the terminology is. But if food's a problem in your life, it's a problem. If alcohol is a problem, it's a problem. And he said the 12 steps are an amazing way to live your life, regardless. And for some people, that spiritual component is a hurdle. Have you experienced that with patients?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, we haven't really touched on this before in bariatric care, but there definitely is what we call in the field church hurt. So folks that have maybe been a part of an organized religion or of a church, and they experienced some difficulties, whether it was in relationships, disagreement with the pastor or the head of the church, and that turned them off completely to any type of spirituality, and I think so for us, we're really trying to be mindful that we're not necessarily saying go to church. We're saying that this is a potential framework that could be helpful. Like if somebody wants to partake in the 12 steps or in Celebrate Recovery or just spirituality in general, to add kind of to that wellness framework, like one of the things I love about Celebrate Recovery, and probably very similar in the 12 steps, is we look at our character defects and we're really taking an honest account of the things that I'm doing that are getting in my way, and then being accountable to others for those things as well as to myself. And I think, in that setting, it's not easy, but it's really helped through, especially going now then into surgery, having been through those programs and understanding, okay, I still got work to do.
Yeah, and I love that too. And in the bariatric care program, I do a monthly support group, and there's 12 steps and there's 12 months. So every year once a month, I do a support group based on that step. Awesome. And I want to invite anybody to participate in that, because it doesn't matter, again, if you have an addiction, but that component of looking at our character defects. And my experience in personal and professionally in working with so many different addictions over the years is that people who struggle with food issues don't often see how their use of food affects anybody else in their life. So part of the 12 steps is not only seeing what are my character defects, and we'll explain a little bit more about what that is, because it sounds really tragic. but it's not necessarily. It's just the things that get in our way of living the way we want to live, doing what we know we should do, and also protective mechanisms, ways
Sure.
we protect ourselves, but they're not healthy.
Mhm.
And they not only affect us, but they affect other people in our lives. And people think, oh, I have this, I have the disease of obesity. That doesn't affect people in my life.
Mm.
Not true.
Very.
How does it affect people in your life?
Depending on the various relationships, I think there can be people in my life that had concern about my weight going up and down, concern about my health. They were unsure how to really talk to me about that. We can be impacting the way other people behave just based on what they see. So if we're a parent or a grandparent and we're using food as a coping skill, or food is our go-to for everything, we are teaching that. So there's definitely an impact. We've talked before about the systems, right? And being a part of that system, we do have an impact whether we see that or not. And it can show up in a lot of different forms.
Absolutely. And other ways that I see it, regardless of what it is especially with the disease of obesity, if your mobility is compromised, then we expect our kids or our partners to do things for us. And that affects their life. I've had extreme cases of extreme morbid obesity where a 20-year-old child feels like they're locked to the house because somebody's got to be there to care for their parent. That is not what we want for our children. And so that, we have, or how about getting on the scale and we don't like what it says and then we're crabby?
Right.
That affects our children, our spouse, our coworkers. So a lot of times, and looking at these character defects through the 12 steps or Celebrate Recovery, it's painful. Like you said, it can be difficult to say, wow, I took a lot of my emotions out on my kids because they didn't like how I felt that day, or whatever it is. But that's important because when we own those things and we share those things, we can let go of those things and therefore let go out of the shame goes with that.
And I love how you talk about sharing those things, because both 12 Steps and Celebrate Recovery, there is that community. So we are sharing in a safe and supportive environment. So we're not alone in whatever it is that we're experiencing.
Right. And in the bariatric world, we really encourage people to be part of communities. Yes. And every therapeutic modality encourages solid support systems. Yes. And these can be solid support systems. So again, you're not saying go out and join the 12 Steps or Celebrate Recovery or a church, but find a community of people who understand, who love you, and will gently confront you about things that are getting in your way.
Yes. And technically, Bari Aftercare is that, right? Like, we are here to love on y'all, and hopefully y'all are loving on each other. But we also, hopefully in safe relationships, can have that permission to confront, lovingly.
You know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about the October version of Family and Friends.
Yes, that's true.
I was a little confrontational that day.
Just a little bit. Yes.
So the spiritual aspect. So I hope we've made it clear that we're not expecting you to believe in any. Right. And the church hurt. The pastor that pastors the church community where I go is Andy Stanley, and I talk about him a lot because to me, Andy Stanley is a higher power. He is not God. I don't pray to Andy Stanley. Yes. But the wisdom that he imparts and the ways that helps me is higher than my knowledge. Yeah. So nature can be a higher power.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about that in a minute, but I want to talk about that church hurt. He talks about all the time how people have been abused by religion. Yes. And they hold that close, and they're angry about that with good reason. Right. And people have seen and heard Christians who are the most judgmental people on the planet. And I have seen and heard that too. Yes. And there are some god-awful stories about religious abuse. And so if you come from a place of that, it makes perfect sense that you would be like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Right. So what we're encouraging you to do is, if religion at this point in your journey is not an option, to look for something that may assist you, that is outside of you, that is maybe bigger than what
Right.
you know. So talk
Yeah.
about spirit or nature for a lot of
Nature.
people.
So I think for a lot of people, whether they are affiliated with a religion or not, there is that sense of like we feel so small when we're in nature because it's, you see the trees and you hear the birds, and or you go to the ocean, like there is this sense that there is something greater. And I
Hmm.
think, in the bariatric journey, like having something outside of us to look to or to experience, to sit quiet in is so important because we can get all jumbled up in here and we've already done that. So maybe spirituality is just going out for a hike.
And I think sometimes when people are in nature and they have that awareness of
Yes.
there's something much bigger than this being,
Yes.
they also get in tune with that small inner voice.
Yeah.
You can call it your conscience, you can
Mm-hmm.
call it a spirit, you can call it
Right.
self-reflection. I don't care what you
Yes.
call it. But most of us have an intuitive sense of what's
Mm-hmm.
right for us. And if we slow down enough, and I think people are
Right.
more likely to slow down in nature
Very true.
than they are in the hustle and bustle of our
Yeah.
daily lives. And so sometimes we can hear more clearly our
Mm-hmm.
conscience guiding us, which
Yes.
could be conscious, could be
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah. Makes me want to get out and go hike.
One of the things that when Tabitha and I met, they're true. Sometimes you meet somebody, there was an
Mm-hmm.
instant connection.
Right.
And there was an instant connection. And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly believe that it's that
Yeah.
core of faith
I agree.
and a belief in, I don't know that our doctrines or
Mm-hmm.
theologies would line up 100%. I don't know that
Right.
much about yours, but I do know that we
Yeah.
both believe in a God and
Yeah.
in Jesus for both of us, but that doesn't have to be for you.
Mm-hmm.
That has totally
Mm-hmm.
100,000 times a million
Yeah.
impacted my health journey, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, relationship with my husband,
Right.
relationship with my children. 100%. And without it,
Yeah.
I don't know how people do it.
So I kind of share a little bit in certain environments, part of my story. And I moved to Las Vegas and I got baptized here. Like I really found a relationship.
How old were you?
So this was 2007. So I think I was like 26,
What about
27.
prior to that?
Prior to that, I did grow up in the church. My mom was a preacher's kid, and there were some issues that I had with religion just because of some of the racism in my family, um, on the church side of the family. So for a while, I kind of was like, you know. But when I moved here, I definitely was searching for something, and I found myself feeling at home in this particular church and started really digging into my personal journey with God. And so I got baptized on February 7th, 2007. And that was probably right in the middle of an extremely low depression point for me. And so I remember just clinging to scripture and different music that was faith based at that time. And that's kind of what led me to even become a therapist. Like I was going to business school and I was sitting in church and I felt God saying, be a Christian counselor. And I was like, what?
Wow.
I just spent 40 grand on business school. So
Wow.
simultaneously, I enrolled in the Masters of Counseling, with the emphasis in marriage and family therapy. And it's changed my life, like the whole direction of my life. So um, I decided to choose a completely different profession, and being in the therapy world, like I've seen people in their most vulnerable and lowest moments.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of folks that come to me that are believers, and there's a lot of folks that aren't. And like you said, for you and for me, there is this sense of, I don't know how people survive without some sense of a belief in something. Because just some of the things that I've experienced, like for me, that's been the constant. So yeah, I don't know. It's been also a part of my bariatric journey because I also struggled with, is this the right thing for me to do? Is this, does this align spiritually with me? But I honestly believe that God wanted me to be healthy. So, I worked through some of those things. But church hurt is absolutely real. It should not be something that anyone should make you feel bad about. Give yourself time to work through that. You may never set foot in a church again, and that's okay. We're not here to proselytize, but just to see, is there something outside of me, something greater
can
than
help.
myself? Yes.
Help guide me.
Yeah.
And because I know, and I'm guessing this is true for most of us, if left to my own devices, I got myself into some trouble, girls and boys.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Being full of self.
Right.
They call in recovery self-will run riot.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm always going after what I want, when I want it, and the hell with everybody else is kind of how they describe addiction, then I'm going to run into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And having a higher power in a sponsor, a support group, a therapist, a therapy group really helped guide me and help me flush out what my values are. And knowing what my values are helps keep me moving in the direction of those values, which is why I talk a lot about meaningful matters. What has meaning to you? What matters the most to you? And then asking yourself, will this behavior move me closer to what matters to me or further from what matters most to me?
Yeah.
So I want us to talk about how specifically our faith has assisted us in our journeys. And my childhood, I grew up in a Catholic church. I went to 12 years of Catholic school.
Okay.
So there was a lot of Catholic indoctrination. And some of it was good, some of it was not good. The things I love a lot of the rituals in the Catholic Mass. I like the Catholic Mass. I don't go to it anymore, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's the music. You're supposed to make a joyful noise unto the Lord, and I've never heard any joyful music in a Catholic church. Gotcha. But it just brings me down, buddy. But the Mass itself I find very beautiful and very reverent. Now, there were some things in the Catholic Church that terrified me as a child, like going into a little dark confessional and saying how bad I was.
Yeah.
I'm not bashing any religion. Do your thing. But as I got older, I realized that it doesn't fill me up in any kind of way. And so when I got into college and into my addictions, of course, church was not part of the deal for me. And then after Steve and I got married, we were both raised Catholic. So we went back to the Catholic Church and we were taking our kids to the Catholic Church. And still, it wasn't like doing anything for me. It was just kind of a habit, I guess. And we wanted our kids, to become aware of God because I always believed in God. But in the South versus where I grew up in the Midwest, I would say 97% of our town was Catholic. Okay. I did not know. I didn't know of other religions. And so we moved to the South, and my kids' friends had these youth groups, and they were so enthusiastic about their youth groups. And I'm like, well, what is that all about? So my kids, we would let them go to the different churches and the different youth groups, and they were like so enthusiastic about their faith. And I was like, what are they doing at these things? But they would take ski trips with their youth group. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So they started doing that. And so then my son went off to college and he went to a church called Buckhead Church, which is part of the North Point Church. And that's where Andy Stanley is. And so when we would go see him in Atlanta, we'd go to his church. And I was like, where has this been all my life? Wow. I was like, so it changed so much for me about my religion, my faith. Andy calls his churches church for unchurched people. People who have had bad experiences with church, people who have, it's a Christian church, but it's very non-denominational. Awesome. Anyway, that's been a big thing. But when I started into my recovery program, I was 29. I went to treatment at the age of 29. And I believed in God, but church was not at all a part of my life. And I remember having to, working through the 12 steps which was all about spirituality. And I remember one day, well, let me back up a little, because all of this is relevant to how I've grown in my mental, physical, and spiritual health all along. When I was 14 years old, I worked at a convent. Remember, it's a Catholic town. And so we had a retirement community for retired nuns. And it sat on the most beautiful piece of property in my heart to me forever. It sat overlooking the Mississippi River on the most beautiful and serene piece of property. And I was 14 years old and I got a job there. So I started working for pay, 75 cents an hour, wiping butts, giving old ladies baths, passing out medications. So illegal. Had to be, right?
Yeah,
but I'll tell you what. First of all, those women, all old women, loved me. And I felt I'll cry probably. I felt a sense of worth and value, and like they enjoyed me. And they were so maternal toward me. And I felt God in that. And then the grounds were so beautiful that I would take my lunch break and I would just go sit and overlook the river. And that was a spiritual connection for me in some way it was just so grounding and peaceful, which was not, my life didn't feel peaceful. So that was a really important foundational part of spirituality, not religion. So then I'm in the 12-step program, which is a very spiritual program. And I'm 29 years old and I'm faced with a decision to make. And it was related to my job that I had at the time. And if I stayed in the job, I was in danger of losing my sobriety because it was my drinking people. It was my very unhealthy behavior crowd. But I felt a lot of value there and I was afraid to leave. And so I went into a church and I sat there in this church and I tried to visualize my life. If I stay in this job, how do I feel? Play it out day to day. How am I feeling? If I leave, how do I feel? And there was absolutely I was uncomfortable with both, but there was a pure sense of peace. And I knew it was a spiritual thing because I got quiet and I listened. And it was like, you have to leave if you want your health, if you want your recovery, if you want to keep your family intact, if you want to build this relationship with your husband and your children who were 3, 3, and 5. I'd been married 7 years. Things were falling apart. So that quiet, the still inner voice, the presence of a higher power was a changing point for me. So I'll go on from there, but I want to hear some of yours.
Wow. That's a lot. There's pockets because I think, as a kid, I went to a lot of church camps and
Were those good experiences or bad?
They were actually really good, minus getting bit by a tick. I did share that with you. But what I loved about...
tell what you did when you got bit by the tick.
So I got bit by a tick. I think I was in 6th grade, church camp. And I don't like bugs. I can't stand them. And I freaked out. So I had my pants halfway down and I'm running down the hall in the cabin looking for the counselor. There's a tick on my butt. Please get it out. So that was not a very spiritual experience. However,
hopefully that'll make you laugh.
Yes. But every time I went to church camp, there was just something about being outside, especially at night. The fire would be going, somebody's playing an acoustic guitar, and we're just singing. And just the music. And so I think that music has really carried over in my spiritual journey because I just love to be in community with people who are like-minded and we're singing and there's music. Like that's been kind of a constant. So even if there was church hurt that I was experiencing, if I was ever in that setting, I could kind of sort of let all the rest of that go, because it was just that connection of being around other people and hearing the music and singing the songs. So fast forward to 2007, when I got baptized, I was actually leading a youth group. And we were doing all those fun things. Like we would take them to these like
Oh,
24-hour,
love it.
like we'd get these big giant like fancy buses or whatever, and we would take like 500 kids,
Oh,
middle schoolers,
love it.
and we'd go to circus. We would do paintball. There was ice skating, and it was all night. Like I was in my 30s at this point,
How
or maybe
fun.
not 30s, late 20s. And I mean, we would be exhausted the next day because it was like 24 hours, no sleep, drinking energy drinks, and just staying up with these kids, making sure nobody got hurt or whatever. But it was a blast. And like through these kids, I really deepened my faith, because, you know, I was getting to understand that growing up, you talked about like the rituals. So I was Lutheran. So we have it's kind of Catholic light. So we had some very similar traditions and rituals, but now at this time I'm in a non-denominational church, and so it was more about a personal relationship with God, and again that connection and community and all of these things that really pulled me out of my depression and helped me to begin to serve others and to get outside of my own
Love
head.
that.
And especially working with the youth, because they had so much going on, but yet they were still, so many of them had such a strong faith. And I was like, how is that possible? You know, like I wanted to experience what they were experiencing. And so it was a really amazing experience, both being a leader and a new believer, as we say in the faith or whatever, but again, giving me that sense of there's something greater. And lastly, I'm going to share, so the pastor of the church calls Las Vegas, obviously known as Sin City, he calls it Grace City. And we talk about it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And one of the youth events, we went to the top of the stratosphere and we just prayed. We prayed over the whole city.
Wow.
So now when I see the stratosphere, that always is a reminder for me. It's just kind of this beacon of hope that, okay, there's a lot of hurting people here, but there's hope. There's a lot of resources and love in this community, like whether it's professional or spiritual, but you wouldn't know. There's quite a few churches in Vegas, surprisingly. So
that is so
yeah,
cool.
it's been a really amazing journey, like different time periods, but it always kind of comes back to community and the music. And
is that how that helps you in your journey?
Yes.
Helps keep you grounded?
Whenever I know that I'm kind of living life on my terms or doing too much, or I got to get plugged back in. So as we were talking about doing this particular episode, there was just so much confirmation from people in the local community, starting Bible studies, doing a faith-based mental health event. So it was kind of like, okay, this feels right now to talk about this. So again, this may not be your experience. We just are sharing what's been helpful for us. So kind of getting back into that higher power, whatever that is for you.
And I want to share a couple other things.
Yeah.
Just because it may be, you may think I'm in a nutcase, but that's okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
But these were such powerful experiences. And again, all of this is to say that without this faith, without this spiritual part, I would not have kept moving forward. My husband and I went to couples therapy. It wasn't all like fairy dust fell on us and we were great. It was a lot of hard work. And so in the bariatric journey, the gotta do's, it's the day-to-day effort. Same with my journey through all of my healing processes, from childhood trauma to overcoming addiction issues and I never intended to be a therapist.
Yeah.
That was never. I never intended to go back to school. I don't know how I finished. I was drinking heavily during my undergrad. So how I graduated, I'll never know. But I like to call some of these God things. And I know this is tangential and I'm going to take up a lot of the time.
That's all right.
So shut me up if you need to.
You're
But
good.
when I went through treatment, And I had a community, that support community. And I went to aftercare, which is the reason I am all about aftercare. If it hadn't been for the year of aftercare, of going to groups and having that support community and having the influence of a power greater than myself through the therapists and the community and the guidance, I would have dropped out. I would have gone back. I didn't have the tools. I was ill-equipped. So the therapy helped me with some of my childhood stuff and learning healthier skills to deal with stress, like we tried to do in Berry Aftercare. But a series of events happened that led me to this therapist. I was with another therapist and something wasn't right, and I trusted that. Rather than just going, well, I guess she's the therapist. There was just not a connection. So I went to this other therapist, and the first thing she said to me was, I will work with you as long as you never blah, blah, blah again. And I'm not going to say that part because it's not relevant. Which was, I was like, you got to be kidding me. But I trusted her. There was something about her. And I was like, well, okay.
signing myself up here.
And I followed through with this thing. And that was the beginning of this journey. So about a year and a half into my intense therapy with her, intense couples therapy, group therapy, all of this stuff, I had decided that I wanted to go back to school and get a master's degree and work in marketing for treatment centers, or I didn't know what, but I wanted to give back to the community. And this therapist never was like, why don't you blah, blah, blah. So one day after months, she looks at me and she says, haven't you ever considered being a therapist? Like, duh. And I was like, oh, that will never happen. Yeah. She's like, why not? I said, I'm impatient. I'm judgmental. I'm quick-tempered.
Right.
I am not a therapist. So now there's this nagging voice. Again, I think it's a spiritual thing because it doesn't go away, right? If something keeps nagging at you. And I came to realize that the reason that wasn't, because she said, Connie, I watch you in group. She said, you will come down on somebody. You'll tell them the way it is. You speak it truthfully. And then I'll see you on the hall with them and you guys are hugging and cutting up. She's like, you have the gift to be able to tell people and still maintain that connection. And I'm like, psh. So what happened? I have 5 siblings and I was like, I already am ostracized from my family. And then they're going to say, oh, who do you think you are? You always thought you were perfect anyway. So I was like, I don't want any more of that. So I'm like, I'm not being a therapist. Well, we decided that was a stupid reason. So I started school. Now I want to tell you a story that happened while I was in school. And I've also had a series of dreams that they're not spiritual in nature, but I know they were of the spirit. So you know how some people have recurring dreams? Yes. So somehow in this master's program, somebody planted an idea of a PhD. And I'm like, are you kidding? That's for smart people, man. I got a 2.7 in my undergrad. I was accepted to this master's degree on conditional, I had to prove. I did great in my master's program. I was ready. I loved it. It was awesome. So somebody plants the seed about a PhD, and I'm like, that's hysterical. A, I hate school. B, I'm not smart like that. And somehow I have this series of dreams. And my husband and I had no money either. I mean, I've been in school now for 2 years, getting my master's. He was supporting, he didn't make a lot of money. And so it cost a lot of money to apply to PhD programs. And I have snowball's chance of hell in getting into one. So I have this series of dreams, not an uncommon dream. I'm in a plane, the plane is going down, and I always wake up before it crashes. Right? Not uncommon. Probably 10 or 12 of those. And I'm like, that is so bizarre. So anyway, we're trying to decide, should I apply to a PhD program? And my therapist was like, what is it? Why do you, she was like, is this about ego? Or I'm like, no, I want to teach professionals about addiction so that they can, and I want to work with patients, She wanted to make sure my motives were good. Sure. So I apply. My husband and I didn't know, should we apply? Because I really did on paper have a snowball's chance of hell in getting into a program. But I didn't even have a high enough GRE score to get into most of them. So I'm like, how realistic is this? So I have a dream. And in this dream, I'm in a small plane this time. There are 8 people in the plane. The plane is going down, and we are all bossy and controlling. And it's a terrible, terrible, rough landing, but we all survived. And I woke up and I told my husband, he said, you need to apply to this program. He said, it's going to be rough, but we're going to make it. So I need you to understand that like 2% of people get into these PhD programs, and I am not the smartest bulb on the tree. So I apply to like 7 or 8 different programs. I get one interview. I live in Iowa. The interview's in Texas. I sure as hell wasn't flying. After all those dreams.
Yeah.
So I call my mom. She's going to drive down there with me. We have a blizzard. Roads are closed. So I had to fly. So I fly. Okay. So when I get there, what I find out, it's like a 3-day process. All of these students have met each other at all these other schools because they all have like 5 or 6 or 7 interviews. Because they got good grades and high GRE scores, and these are people I think are smart. I'm like, oh shit. So I go into this interview and back up. One day my therapist gave me a homework assignment, and she said, I want you to imagine I was working with ex-convicts, fresh out of federal prison, wiping me out. I was working, going to school, applying for these programs. I was wiped. She said, I want you to protect your own energy so you don't get so drained. So I'm like, please, wackadoodle.
How do I do that?
I'm like, that's so
Yeah.
woo-woo.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is red. And I'm like, oh no, I can't choose red. Red's an angry color. Red's an
Yeah.
So I'm like getting ready for work. And I'm like, shit, I forgot about that. So I look out my window and there's a cardinal. It's red. So I start imagining this cardinal, flying around me before I go to work, protecting me. Now, this is months before my interview. Months. So this cardinal starts showing up at our house to the point where the babysitter is like, why is this cardinal always here? And pretty soon the male and the female are at our back door all the time. So we just said in our family, that's God's way of reminding us that God is in charge. All is well. All is well. God is in charge. That's where that mantra came from me. When I would see a cardinal, and to this day, all is well. God is in charge. So now I get down to Texas. I'm in the hotel room, and I'm like, one of these things does not belong, and it's me. So I'm in the hotel room, and I hear a cardinal. Like I know what they sound like. And I'm like, and I hear it, and I hear it, and I hear it. And I'm like, well, if God sends me a cardinal, I should go look. So I go outside and I hear it like, this is going to freak you out. And some people are probably going to send the paddy wagon for me. But I go outside and I hear this cardinal. I hear it, I hear it, I hear it. And I'm like, I can't see it. It's kind of driving me crazy. But I'm like, I got to go or I'm going to be late. So I go back in the room, and like you are sitting there, I hear a voice. You don't have to see me to know I'm there. I'm like, okay, God.
Wow.
I called my husband and I told him about that. I said, no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. God is in charge. All is well. So you can think I'm crazy, but I had that experience. So I go to these interviews, and I'll tell you a funny little story, and I'll wrap up pretty soon. But so I go to the interviews, and it's a group interview. We have they interview like 40 students out of 1,000. They interview more than that, but some of them are phone. So I'm there with this group of 40 kids. They were kids. I was, 34. They were 22. So I feel like the old person there. And they break us into groups, and then we interview with students, we interview with professors, So I'm in this great big library table, conference table kind of thing, and there's 8 students and like 6 professors. And they're asking us questions as we go around, and I think this is what got me into the program. they said to us, "What is your favorite book you've ever read?" So people are like, the Bible and Gandhi. And I'm thinking, you guys are lying. That's the favorite book you've ever read?
Right.
So there was this trash novel out at the time about all these women who were addicted to pills and their husbands. So they come to me and I said, I think it's The Valley of the Dolls, which was this trash novel. They all just burst out laughing.
Love it.
And I think it's because I was like, yeah, those are beautiful books, but that's not my favorite.
Yes.
I like this trash novel. So I honestly think that's what got me in the
Yeah.
program. So anyway,
You're real.
so that was such a spiritual experience for me. One more. Anyway, two more. Very quick.
Okay.
So we come home. I get into this program. 8 people got in. It's like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yep.
Never wanted to go back to school. No. Now I'm going off to be a therapist. So we had to move from Iowa to Texas. So we sold our house the first night. Did have a house in Texas. Lived in a pop-up camper. Pop-up camper for 8 weeks. So when people talk to me about, it's hard. Let me tell you about hard.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about taking a leap of faith. So we're doing this. Back in the day, people had to wear suits and ties to work. My husband was in the KOA campground showering and putting on a suit and tie every morning. Anyway, I was having a mental breakdown, went into serious depression. Anyway, went to therapy, started medication, which literally saved my life. That's neither here nor there. But so these 2 cardinals in Iowa, when we were getting ready to move, I'm not kidding you, they didn't leave. They did not leave our house. The babysitter was like, what is up with this? And my therapist said to me, they're trying to tell you goodbye. I was like, I'm saddest to leave my cardinals.
Wow.
So anyway, that was the thing. But so we go to Texas and then we come here and I have a dream one night about, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years ago. And in this dream, I died. And I'm with Jesus. And Jesus is looking at me. And it's those eyes that you see in pictures that are brilliant green and gold and brown and the love, Tabitha, that I felt, I started sobbing in this dream because it was so powerful and so overwhelming. And all I could think is, if we are truly loved that much, we have got to have more love for ourselves. And we have to share that love with other people. And I believe that's why we're on this earth. And so I believe that all of this spirituality, and it's not been through an organized religion, it's been through listening and being open to other people and a group and having those powerful messages that I trust are from a higher power. And I believe that our job is to connect with other people from that spiritual level. And I think that's what connected us. And one day when I was dating my husband and didn't know him that well, my friend came down, we were in college, and I said, I want you to meet this guy I'm dating. We worked at a grocery store. So we go to the store, and he's being our little checker boy. And we go through the line, and I looked at him, and I had this like out-of-body experience where I was like, I know him. It's like, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
Then I went back to drinking and partying like a college kid. But so my spiritual process is absolutely the core of what has spurred me on in my personal recovery, because I strive to be a better me. I strive to keep myself healthy because I can't help others if I'm not healthy. I strive to have compassion for myself, even though that's difficult. I strive to serve other people. I am active in my non-denominational church now. I do a small group. I'm a small group leader of women, and I love it. And my husband we're older now, right? And my husband, are you familiar with The Chosen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when that series came out, he just dove deep into his faith. And as we get older, our faith is more and more important. Again, it's not a doctrine,
Right.
but it's a faith and a belief in something so much greater than us, because we are not the be all and end all. And so my hope is that people will find whatever their higher power is and use that strength from outside of themselves when the going gets tough. Recovery is tough. Building relationships is tough. Working through painful childhood trauma is tough. But when we know there are people and the power of a group and people who will love us through that, it's what's kept me going on my journey.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you for sharing. So I think I shared this with you, and it's weird, but I know it's God. So when I first stepped into the house that I bought, there was this wind chime in a really weird place in the master bedroom, like between the bedroom and the bathroom, and it had the cardinal. And I knew this was the one. I thought of you, I thought of God,
Oh,
I
wow.
was like, this is the house. And I was the first one to put in the offer. We got it.
Wow.
And it's like
A knowingness.
like a block from in two directions from my son's best friends. We're next to the pediatrician. Like it's right by my favorite park. Like it was the spot. And it's funny because I remember hearing, parts of the story that you shared as far as the cardinal. And I was like, this is it. But just even this week, like it's been kind of a heavy week at work, and
Very for you.
random people, not random, but people who are spiritual, not necessarily even believers, but spiritual people have been texting me out of the blue. You've been on my mind. How are you doing? What's going on? People that I hadn't talked to in a while. And there is this sense of connection in the spiritual sense. And again, not a religious sense, but that we are connected, and people just had this feeling like something's up. I need to know you're okay. How's it going?
I love that.
And then for us, when we're talking about, faith and spirituality, and I'm getting these texts at the same time about a new Bible study and all this stuff, it was like, it doesn't feel like it's random. Um, so you talked about that overwhelming love that you felt in the dream. And I think for me, because historically I've had issues of feeling enough and loved and chosen, wanted. And so through my faith journey, really getting to see myself through the way that God sees me, and not looking at myself as, overweight, or I'm too black, or I'm too white, or whatever those characteristics are, but just from this pure sense of who he is and how he loves me. So I felt that as you were talking about the dream in his eyes. And so I think for many people, spirituality can really be an answer to those questions that we don't really know how to answer. I don't know, it may create more questions, but there is still this connection and community that I think is so important. So I just appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. And you and I are very open about with each other.
Yes.
And you said some things yesterday that, we'll just talk about our belief, and you shared something with me that you had written. And in it you said, I know whose I am. You belong to a creator,
Right.
And we have to, I think this can help us in our journeys in recovery from obesity, or in our health journey, or, staying true to that centeredness. We're so hard on ourselves, but we are loved. We are loved. And do we not owe it to ourselves to give ourselves love? Not let ourselves off the hook and not be like, I can do whatever I want, not have accountability. No. But to know that I was brought here for a purpose, and I believe for all of us, not just those in the therapy community, but all of us are here to connect with other humans and to help them either like with the smile or the compliment or the shirt
Kind
that you
gesture,
wear
yeah.
or the, and I just believe that helps us too.
True.
When we help others, we're helping ourselves. And this bariatric community and the recovery community is so known for being so hard on themselves. And having a spiritual component, whether it's the group, because your group is going to tell you, listen, you're being so hard on yourselves, but choosing to believe that and cooperate with the spirit that says, forgive yourself. You forgive others. You mentioned something about forgiveness earlier
Yeah.
when we were
So
talking.
when I was leading the middle school students, we were learning about forgiveness. And at that time, my biological father had kind of entered my life indirectly through my brother. And I recognized that the barrier that I put in there was I hadn't forgiven him for not being present in my childhood, in my life. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to teach kids about forgiveness, I got to be able to walk the walk. So forgave my dad and then got to meet him in person like several months later after 26, 27 years. And, I truly believe that was designed. Like I had to move through that in order to meet him and it be a good meeting. So there was just a lot of powerful things that were happening around that time in my life. And I believe that was all based on the spiritual journey that I was on because I was open and listening and trying to understand.
That. Isn't it funny how neither one of us were going to be therapists?
No, I was
like,
not.
You need to be a therapist. What?
I was like,
you gotta be joking.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, I did like the Dear Abby column. And I always wanted to be Dear Tabby and have people write to me and like, I'd give them advice or whatever, but I never had considered.
And it's funny because being a therapist is not giving advice.
But just that I like to help. You know what I mean? That sense of help. So
do you know she's from the city I lived in Iowa? She's from Sioux City.
That's awesome. Dear Abby.
Yeah, Dear Abby and her sister Ann Landers.
That's right.
Wow. So, again, all of this is not to promote a religion but to say, look for and listen for. And I pray for people's miracles. Yeah. I really do. I hope that they are willing to be open to them.
Right.
And let people connect with you because connection is a spiritual thing.
It is.
I don't think either one of us talk too much about religion.
Not really.
I do go to a church. It's a non-denominational Christian church. I am filled there. Awesome. I wish I had that as a child.
For sure.
But I love it. I love it. And Andy Stanley, I swear, is half therapist, half preacher. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. Just a lot of wisdom. So whatever spirituality means to you, please open your mind up to it and be willing to trust that small inner voice. Trust your intuition. Trust what you know is right for you. Absolutely. And let it be something that when you're struggling with, I really want this food, but that it's not in alignment with your health goals. And draw on the power of that higher power. And that could mean calling a friend. Yes. It could mean getting online and going to your community support group. It could be a million things. But we don't have to do this alone. We are not the be all and end all.
Absolutely not. Wow.
So one of the things that every now and then in bariatric care or on social media, I'll talk about something that Andy Stanley said, but I've not been I try not to be too vocal because I know it can be a turnoff, but it's something I want to change. I want to talk more openly about my faith and my spirituality.
Yeah. It's a part of you.
It's a huge part. I wouldn't be here. My marriage wouldn't have lasted. My children would have had a very different childhood. As same for you, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's been lots of little miracles.
Now look for your miracle.
Yeah.
Any parting words?
Thank you for just letting us share
Yeah.
openly and vulnerably. And, again, we meant no disrespect to anyone, that this may not be your cup of tea. That's okay. But just super, super excited to see what's in store for all of us.
Yeah. And, I would love to hear your comments, like, don't ever do that again.
Right.
Or talk more about this. Or
Yeah.
we're thinking about adding a component to the Bariatric program. If you're not part of that, it's www.bariaftercare.com, where we give encouragement, and there's a community of support every day, all day. And, however you're losing weight, this is, I always say we go beyond bariatrics. So it's about losing weight, but it's also about having a healthy life.
Yes.
So please join us for that. But truly would love to hear your comments about today's episode, because this is outside the box, big time.
Very, very.
And I am honored to have shared it with you,
Yeah,
because I really admire and respect your spirituality and how you follow your beliefs and your faith.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for being with us, friends. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.